How's it going, everybody? I know it's been a while since I've cammed up, but here we are. For those of you who are interested, one of the reasons why I haven't talked that much football this year is because my buddy Deshaun and I are there are rumors going around saying we might do a football review. It would happen in January when all of our teams are done playing. Regardless of how far our teams get into the playoffs and that type of deal, remains to be seen. But we are talking about it, which is the reason why I haven't talked a lot of football here up on YouTube. However, I do have my Wildcat Facebook and MySpace and Twitter pages. So this is for mainly them. And we will recap the season, and then we'll go over a little bit more analysis when Deshaun and I go through our football review. So I'm happy to report, unlike last year when I came on here, a little disappointed in the Wildcats having their first losing season in a decade, roughly about a decade. They are the 2012 Great Northwest Athletic Conference champions, which is, it was huge. It was a bizarre year, which we'll go into, but I will take this. We're not going to go to the playoffs. No GNAC team made to the playoffs this year. Not surprising, because there was a ton of parity in this conference. Nobody ran away with it, which we will discuss. But I'll take it. It is nice to show that last year was in fact a fluke, and things landed in the Wildcats' favor at the end of the season, because it was a bizarre year. But I'll take it. Unlike last year, where people were kind of questioning the play calling, there was a small quarterback controversy. Nothing was consistent. The Wildcats lost a lot of games that they would usually win in the past. Like the game on the road against Western Oregon, and also the game against Simon Fraser. This was 2 years ago, but this year they came through. And let's recap the season and tell you how the Wildcats became the Great Northwest Athletic Conference champions. Like I said, it was a bizarre year. For the starters, as I mentioned in the preview video with Deshaun, the Wildcats opened up the season on the road for 3 straight games in Kingsville, Texas, against the Texas A&M Kingsville Javelinas, Burnaby, British Columbia, with Simon Fraser, and the trip was supposed to conclude in Monmouth, Oregon, against Western Oregon. That did not happen, but we'll go through these 3 games first. The Wildcats ended up losing to the Texas A&M Kingsville Javelinas by a score of 35-7. The Wildcats, if my memory serves me correctly, they couldn't get their offense going. They ended up, I think, missing a couple of field goals, so that, of course, didn't help. But that was a loss. That was the one game on the schedule where I pretty much said that's probably going to be a loss. So, not really surprised. Then you got the next game, which was against Simon Fraser in Burnaby, British Columbia. And the year before, the Wildcats were up by a large lead, and next thing you know, they ended up losing that game and giving Simon Fraser their first victory over the Cats in a while. So that was a toss-up, and the Wildcats were victorious 56-28. Just a good, solid GNAC win. I remember I was able to listen to that game on the radio, and it was close, but the Wildcats just slowly but surely did what we're accustomed to them doing, and that is slowly but surely building up a lead to the point where it's eventually out of reach, and you get a score like 56-28. The next game was in Monmouth, Oregon, against the Western Oregon Wolves. This was a tough defensive battle. We're talking turnovers galore. It was not a pretty sight on either side of the football. And the Wildcats ended up winning in overtime by a score of 21-14. But either team could have won this game. Western Oregon pretty much came out and punched Central in the mouth. They led for the majority of the game. And our running game and our special teams pretty much gave us this victory. The Wolves were marching late in the fourth quarter, and next thing you know, we pick them off, and we went down the other side, the other end of the field, scored a touchdown to tie it up, and that sent the game into overtime. So the Wildcats at this point were supposed to return home to begin their home portion of their schedule. This is where, unfortunately for the Wildcats, and this is when the year started getting a little odd, they kind of experienced a smaller version of what the New Orleans Saints dealt with when they were dealing with Hurricane Katrina. There were wildfires in Chelan and Kittitas County. And so there were 2 games on the schedule that were supposed to be played in Ellensburg, and unfortunately they had to be moved to Bothell, which is, which is about, I would say, maybe an hour and a half west of Ellensburg. If you look at that drive, but either way, that really kind of set things out of sync because they had to play their next 2 games in Bothell. Props to the North Shore School District for hosting us for 2 weeks and on such short notice. We played in Pop Keeney Stadium. If you were watching this on YouTube, you can follow me on Facebook and MySpace. And I do have pictures of at least one of the games, the game against Humboldt State, which we'll talk about in a second. I don't necessarily know if this is true, but because of the wildfires, they were practicing on the west side of the mountains. Now, granted, I did not hear that from a central source, but that when their games were moved to the west side of the Cascades, the news began to kind of go news began to be focused more sports news along like Seattle Times and Como 4 and that type of deal. So the Wildcats ended up being talked about a little bit more here on this side compared to previous years. So I don't necessarily know if that was true, but I did hear a rumor that they were also practicing away from the Kittitas County as well because of the poor air quality. So the first game that was in Bothell was against Azusa Pacific, and the Wildcats won. I was able to attend both the games in Bothell. The first game was a 41-17 victory over the Azusa Pacific Cougars. Pretty much what I expected. The Cougars' offense did click eventually, but that game was a game that I was expecting to have a score like 41-17. So, and then the big one, Humboldt State, the second game in Bothell. This one was huge on the calendar at the beginning of the year because Central got swept by Humboldt last year. And at the time, Humboldt State was ranked 9th in the coaches poll and 16th in the D2football.com poll. And Central blew them out of the water. I was there in attendance, 31-3, and it was awesome. I mean, it was close first half, and then next thing you know, again, special teams and the running game just took over, and next thing you know, the Wildcats are 5-1 at the to start off the 4-1. Excuse me, to start off the season, and then it got more interesting because we had a transfer running back from the University of Washington, Joey Fogerson, who had been dominating our running game for the most part. And he was kicked out of, not only kicked off the team, but he was also kicked out of the university. President Gaudino expelled him from the university due to getting in trouble with the off-the-field issue. I don't have all the details, but from what I understand, I believe I think he assaulted somebody. So, but this was, he either assaulted somebody while he was with Central or while he was with UW, or he was still dealing with the UW problems that he had. So President Gaudino, said enough's enough, and you're off the team and you're out of the school. So yes, that did hurt, but it was nice to see that there are, in fact, some people who hold players accountable in college football these days because, if you look at D1, there's scandals galore. So it's nice to know that Central does not take that approach of sweeping something under the rug like that. But it did hurt the team a little bit. The running game, for the most part, was pretty solid. We became, that was our big weapon offensively. Unfortunately, when it stalled, so did the offense. And a prime example is the next game. Wildcats coming off a huge win against Humboldt State. They ended up losing to Dixie State for the first time ever in school's history, 29-21 in St. George, Utah. And that was a dagger. It wasn't the biggest loss of the season. That's coming up, but still, nobody was really happy about that. I listened to the game online, and the Wildcats just could not stop the Red Storm on third down. We stopped them on third down a couple of times with 2 big drives late in the second half. Probably win that game. But that did not happen. We finally played in Ellensburg for homecoming weekend on October 13th. The air quality was in good shape with the fires and everything, so finally got to play a home game, first home game of the season. It was against Simon Fraser, and the Wildcats won 51-10. Talk about a homecoming game, that's what I'm talking about. The big dagger, unfortunately, that probably said that said that the Wildcats are not going to the playoffs and not being ranked in the region was the next game. They did ended up losing to Azusa Pacific, 24-17 in Glendora, California, to give Azusa Pacific their first GNAC win. We knew that Azusa Pacific was eventually going to win a GNAC game. It just stunk that it happened to be us. And it started a pattern in that regard because that game was a night game in California, and the very next week, the Wildcats fell short to Humboldt State 14-10. Now at this point, the Wildcats were 5-4, and at the beginning of the season, I said that what I was looking for was 6 wins. So I was kind of wondering, are we going to get 6 victories? We got Western Oregon, who played us tough, and we got Dixie State, who beat us to wrap up the season. And at that point, there was pretty much a 3-way tie between Humboldt State, Western Oregon, and Central Washington for the Great Northwest Athletic Conference title. And the Wildcats, in my opinion, had the most favorable schedule because we finally had home games, and our last 2 games were in Eberg. So we took care of business against Western Oregon 36-32, which created a really bizarre situation in the last week of the season. Because since Humboldt also lost, the Wildcats and Lumberjacks were tied for first in the conference. So Central wins, Humboldt loses, Central gets the conference outright. If Humboldt wins, Central loses, Humboldt wins the conference title. If they both win, they both got a share of the conference title. If they both lost, since Humboldt would have lost to Western Oregon, we would have had tri-champions, meaning Western Oregon, Humboldt State, and Central Washington would have all won the conference title, which is kind of funny because there are only 6 teams in the conference, so you would have had half the conference winning the conference title. Central took care of business and won 51-19 over Dixie State. It was a dominating performance on all sides of the ball. Defense, running game. Ryan Robertson, our senior quarterback, finished his Wildcat career going 18 for 19 in passes. And then we had to wait a couple hours for Humboldt State and Western Oregon to wrap up their game, and Western Oregon won, so that gave Central the conference title. So to wrap up the Great Northwest Athletic Conference standings for 2012, we'll start from worst. We'll go from worst to first. Dixie State 3-7, 3-7 in the conference, 3-8 overall. Azusa Pacific, I got to give props to the Cougars. I had them finishing in last. The fact that they finished in 5th and were 4-6, and at one point were the hottest team in the GNAC later on, late in the season. Props to you guys. We're probably going to have to deal with you later on. They finished 4-6 in conference, 4-7 overall. Simon Fraser finished 4-6 in conference, but they finished 5-6 overall, which is why they edged Azusa Pacific. Fourth place was Western Oregon, 6-4 overall. 6-4 in conference, 6-5 overall. Humboldt State 6-4 and in conference, 7-4 overall. And Central Washington 7-3 in conference, winning the Great Northwest Athletic Conference title for the first time in 2 years. and they also had a 7-4 record overall, which was 2 more wins than what they had the previous year. I'll go over more about what the team looked like when I do the football review, but in this bizarre year that we had where we lost our running back, we had a lot of parity in the GNAC, and we played our first 6 games on the road, and we had to deal with the forest fires. I'll take it. And I think that this is an incredibly positive thing for the program, because they were able to persevere in such weird conditions that I do think that they will continue to be a force in the GNAC as we move forward. Another good thing is it shows that last year, again, was in fact a fluke. So we don't have to worry about whether or not, anything about the playbook, anything about the quarterback, the running back, defense. Okay, they got back on the same page and they were successful. So I understand you can't win every single year, but at the same time, last year was really odd for the Wildcats, and to be a Wildcat fan. This year, much more accustomed to what we're usually used to seeing. So 2012 Great Northwest Athletic Conference Championship is in the Kittitas County in Ellensburg, Washington, and it's with Central Washington this year, which the fan part of me is saying that's where it belongs. Okay, so that will do it for the Central coverage. Follow me on Facebook, MySpace, and Twitter if you're watching this on Facebook and MySpace. Check out my YouTube vlog. Also, we might be talking, keep your fingers crossed for this one, but in a couple of weeks we might be talking some volleyball, because the Central Washington volleyball team is ranked in the region. Not only that, they are tied for second in the Great Northwest Athletic Conference with Western Oregon. They recently played each other, and Central did win. They are behind Western Washington, so they are fighting for a playoff berth as we speak. Looking at the regional rankings, Central is ranked 5th in the region. Other GNAC schools who are ranked in the region are Western Washington, who is 2nd, and we got Western Oregon in 7th. So we'll have to see what happens. We might be talking some volleyball as we might have another Central team in the D2 playoffs, which we haven't had in a while, actually, now that I think about it, because I think the last time we had a Central team in the postseason, we had the softball team go to the regional tournament a couple years ago. I know last year we talked some basketball at the end of the year, but that was conference. It wasn't D2 playoffs. So that will do it for the Central coverage. Thanks for watching. Follow me on Facebook, MySpace, and Twitter. And check out my YouTube vlog. And let's go Cats, the 2012 Great Northwest Athletic Football Conference Champions.